Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. This is the Rotary Club of Toronto. I'm John Fortney, the club president, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first of our racism series in our virtual Rotary meetings. After the invocation and the recognition of the traditional lands, please stay tuned for the playing of the national anthem and the loyal toast. At this time, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of many Indigenous peoples who have walked and cared for this land for 15,000 years. They include the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Treaty Peoples of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We need to feel more to understand others, love more to be loved in return, cry more to cleanse ourselves, laugh more to enjoy ourselves, hear more and listen to the needs of others, give more, take less, look more and realize that we are not so different from one another. We need to create a world where we can all live together peacefully. Thank you. Now our national anthem. If you'd like to, please stand for the national anthem and the loyal toast. Ladies and gentlemen, Her Majesty, the Queen. Please be seated. Thank you, Glenn and Brigitte, again. Rotarians and guests, it is now my pleasure to introduce our head table. I am pleased to have with me today the following people. Sylvia Geist, Rotarian since 2004, classification psychology. Sylvia is a clinical psychologist in private practice and is one of the program committee's coordinators for our racism series. Jeffrey Johnson, Rotarian since 1993, classification, specialty catering. He is the president of Onville Event Design and Catering, a past club president, and the other coordinator of our program committee's racism series, and our host to our guest speakers, who are Stacia Loff, a lawyer and Deputy Grand Chief of the Association of Iroquois and Allied Nations. Imran Emil, Channel Sales Manager, Central Canada, Canon Canada, Inc. And Nia Singh, a principal lawyer at Matt Legal Services, human rights advocate, and a 2018 Toronto mayoral candidate, who you will hear more about later. Ladies and gentlemen, our head table. For our virtual meetings, we do not have a monitor to introduce visiting Rotarians and guests, so I will proceed. There are probably too many, and I don't know, I'm sure there's many Rotarians, maybe especially on YouTube, from hopefully around the world. So I want to thank you for choosing our club for your makeup, and we hope that you enjoy the meeting. To our guests, who I also believe there will be many, welcome to our virtual meeting today. Please feel free to contact the office and find out how you may be able to make a difference by joining us. Rotarians, please welcome our visitors in the tradition of our great club. Before we get started, you already know this, but in case you don't, you should be aware that all the virtual Rotary meetings, that if you have your video camera on, and when using Google Meet, you may show up on the YouTube or the Google Meet recordings or live streaming. If you do not want to appear, please turn off your video. We will not be able to edit you out later. Thank you. We have a long agenda planned for you today, so we have only one quick announcement from our chair of our Marketing and Communications Committee, Deb Snyder. Over to you, Deb.
Develop relationships and network with other leaders.
Give back to your community and make lifelong friends.
Serve the public for the greater good.
You're invited. Join us in making a difference.
Visit rotarytoronto.com/join and fill out the form. Back to you, President John.
Thank you, marketing team. You guys have worked on it. It's great. This has been a long time coming. We're very excited about what you're working on. This is going to put this to good use. Thank you. To start off our racism series, I have a video from our own mayor, John Tory, to share with you. And then Jeffrey Johnson will take over to introduce the series. May I have the video, please?
Hello, Mayor John Tory here, and may I begin by thanking the Rotary Club of Toronto for taking the initiative to present the Anti-Racism series. I know from my own personal knowledge and attendance that beyond the incredible financial support given back to the community, this club has a long history of engagement with vital community issues, and that continues with this series. You know, while Toronto has done better than many other places, we still face a major challenge as a community in dealing with racism and discrimination. Your series will explore this in depth and remind us that, unfortunately, racism and discrimination is still more pervasive than we might think, and that the victims are a broad range from our Black residents to Jewish, Muslim, Asian, and LGBTQ2+ communities. I think it is especially important that the series will examine lived experiences, because only through their eyes, the eyes of people who have had this terrible experience, can we truly understand the searing and corrosive impact of racism on Torontonians. And it will look at systemic racism, practices and policies which have just become baked into the way we do things and which no one has thought to change until now. We are one of the most admired cities in the world, in part because of our respectful, embracing values, which celebrate our differences and completely reject racism and discrimination of all kinds. In 2021, the challenge is for all of us to become better informed about where that racism and discrimination still exist in Toronto, and then take collective action to eliminate it. As usual, the Rotary Club of Toronto is at the forefront of the kind of education and the action that is needed to help to make this happen. To that, I can only say congratulations and thank you for hosting such an important series.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome. Enough is Enough is a three-part series examining racism and what we can do to affect it in a positive manner. Today's segment, we will hear what effect racism has on racialized people and their cultures. Part 2, next week, we'll examine unconscious bias, systemic racism, and institutionalized racism. The third and final segment on February the 5th will show us ways we can attain equal opportunities for all. Take this journey with us. Stay for all three segments. Now, January the 29th, 2017, Quebec City, shortly after evening prayer, 6 Muslims were shot dead by Alexander Bisnet, whilst 19 others were injured. September the 4th, 1995, as Dudley George set out for a demonstration in Ipperwash, he was shot and killed by an OPP officer for holding a stick. The Native Women's Association of Canada believe missing and murdered Native women exceed 1,181. December 28th, 2019, Rabbi Shyam Rottenberg was celebrating the 7th day of Hanukkah when a masked man wielding a large knife broke into his home, resulting in 5 men wounded, 2 hospitalized and 1 dead. May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was murdered in front of our very eyes, which resulted in chaos, violence and demonstrations across the globe. The only positive is George Floyd has become a catalyst for social change. Racial violence, murder, mayhem is the pinnacle of racism. But what of ground zero? You know that everyday racism, the racist joke, police profiling, employment, promotion, education, medical inequities, and of course, unconscious bias. So today we have 3 very special people who will share their personal experiences and the effect racism has had on their cultures. I will ask the group to introduce themselves and to show you their reality. Stacia.
Niawa Jeffrey. Sego sewa gwegong. Yega hadaki nyingong yogats. Nitawage nongandege. Greetings everyone. My name is Stacia Loft and I'm from Tyendinaga Mohawk Territory. I am a proud daughter, sister, auntie, mother, and also a wife. I am a recent graduate of Queen's Law in 2020 and also elected Deputy Grand Chief of the Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians this past November. I anticipate my call to the bar in 2021. So although I appreciate being called a lawyer so early on, I have to make the correction that I am articling. So my current articling position is with Amnesty International, and that will wrap up in the next few months. I think it's important before we start to share our personal experiences with our audience today on how racism has impacted our lives. It is important for me to recognize some of my brothers and sisters who have died as a result of racism. Neil Stonechild, Jordan River Anderson, Beverly Chrisjohn, Brian Sinclair, Tina Fontaine, Sean Thompson, Barbara Kettner, Greg Ritchie, Josephine Pelche, Colton Bushi, Chantal Moore, Joyce Echequan, the thousands of Indigenous children killed in residential schools, and the 1,000+ missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in this country. I am thankful to be alive here in Turtle Island. Like many of those who I have named that have passed on to the spirit world, I myself have experienced racism as an Indigenous person and as an Indigenous woman, and I'm here living to tell you and share with you my experiences. I think it's important for you to know that I've encountered racism almost every single day of my life in some form or another. Over the years, this has ranged from personal and professional interactions and experiences with institutions like schools and hospitals, as well as regular activities like going to the park or shopping for groceries or personal items. I have been told that I am dirty and stupid and that my parents must be drunks and on welfare. I've been asked if I live in a teepee and if all Indigenous women are easy. I've been kicked out of malls for so-called loitering. I've been followed around in and out of stores by associates looking to see if I might have stolen something or to produce a receipt to show my proof of purchase. I have been stopped by the police and questioned why I was in the park with my friends while I was in high school. I've been kicked out of class for raising the issue of the erasure of Indigenous history from course curriculums. I was told soon after I gave birth that there were factors in my life that might not make me a good mother. I was arbitrarily pulled over by the police while on a road trip, asking if my daughter, who was traveling with me in the front seat, was actually my daughter. I have received multiple comments on how it must be nice not to have to pay taxes and get a free education. And I've been told how I don't look Native because I'm not wearing braids, or that my look is exotic. And really, that any mistreatment that I might have encountered or received over my life must have been because I've deserved it. And from that, I've received and experienced numerous feelings, and many of them have ranged from a young age as intrigue. Like, why do people ask such silly questions? And as I've gotten older, to be confusion. Where is this coming from? And then just outright anger. Why or how could someone even think this? And then just sheer frustration. What you believe actually isn't true. And these experiences have led me to be at times complacent, hopeless, helpless, but in many ways, this and these experiences have shaped me into a strong, resilient Indigenous woman. Now, over to you, Imran.
Stacia, thank you very much. President John, Mr. Johnson, esteemed guest, thank you very much for having me here on this very happy and proud platform for Rotary Club. For those of you who don't know me, my name is not Apu. I do not own a Quickie Mart. I've never worked in a Quickie Mart. I do not have 3 wives and 7 kids. Not yet, though, but we'll get there someday. And the red dot on my wife's forehead is not a push start button. It is actually Bindi, and it's announces a marital status of a lady. I say these things because these are the snippets of some of the racial slurs and titles that were bestowed upon me by some of my right-wing friends. So I thought I'd share them and put them out there, that these are hurtful, they are demeaning, and they belittle you, and it's not right. My story starts in Pakistan. I immigrated in about 21 years over here. I do come from an aviation background and been a part of the military forces within Pakistan, and then ended up in California, earned my commercial pilot license from there, went to Arizona, did a bachelor's degree in business, and ended up coming to Canada. Just like any Iranian doctor or Indian doctor, my story is no different. They are driving cabs. I had to start from the bottom also myself. And I think this constitutes a professional marginalism because you do not have a Canadian experience, therefore you will not get the top jobs. Having that said, my story gets a little bit more interesting because while I was here, the unfolding of the 9/11 events were happening, and oblivious to the fact that how quickly and how close to home it will hit for me. So 9/11 happened, and then November 26th rolled in, and I'm at work, and I get a frantic call from my wife, begging me to come home because there's a bunch of officers ransacking my place. So I go home supersonic. I can see officers in plain clothes and in uniform. Sidearms are there. They're going through my place like a raccoon goes through a garbage can. Come to find out they're CISAs and FBI, and because I fit the profile of a pilot who can fly a plane, have an Afghan wife, therefore I fit the profile perfectly. And that started an ordeal for us where they pulled us aside, pulled me aside, take the wife and the kids away, and then start showing me photographs of all these bearded men with the AK-47. How are you related to this guy? How are you related to that guy? How do you know these people? What can you fire? What can you fly? What kind of explosive are you savvy with? On and on. on and on. And despite of the good defense, you can say whatever. It was just a very dangerous time to be a Muslim. And that's what we endured. And right after that, the passports were taken. I had to report into a CC's officer on weekly basis, give a tally of my events for the week. In between, my father had a heart attack, couldn't leave the country because you're still under an investigation, and it just went on and on, and it was. The aftermath of that was that when you come to work, everybody realizes that now you're a butt of jokes also, and I became the resident terrorist at the company, and it was just a very, very difficult time. Their entire focus on me was to find a link between me and Al Qaeda, and we had to defend ourselves. And when was the last time you were in Afghanistan because your wife is from Afghanistan? All of that. So it just took quite a while. It took about 2 years for us to have them go away, and this was only due to community support. This was only due to documentary evidence. This was only due to having a strong argument to defend yourself. So that's what we did, and here we are to talk about it today. But I would not wish it on my worst enemy. The scrutiny and the marginalization that happened at that particular moment in time. Over to you, Mr. Nia.
Thank you, Imran. And I could start off by saying I have a similar experience to Imran in the sense that after 9/11, I was stopped in Peel region and then asked, actually York region, and asked numerous times, what's my origin? And I said, I'm Canadian. No, what's your origin? And I said, what do you want me to tell you, Africa and India? He goes, where were you born? I'm here. And then it was the questions that just kept trying to allude that I was from somewhere else, I didn't belong, and that I was part of the problem. Anyways, my name is Nia Singh. I am a human rights advocate and a lawyer, and I haven't always been that. Only recently, as a mature student, did I become a lawyer. For the majority of my professional career, I've been a music producer, studio owner, and mentor to a lot of youth. And that all came about just because of my nature of always wanting to help people. But through helping and through running the studio, I was exposed to so much racism, so much injustice, that I took it upon myself to start running for politics, municipal office in 1997. I was 23 years old at the time. And then I rejoined that fray in 2010 and kept running politically, federally, provincially, and most recently in 2018 for the mayor of Toronto. But the reason why I've always ran is because I understand that without protection from the government and without legal knowledge, my life is hanging in the balance. I grew up not poor, not wealthy, but I didn't grow up in the housing communities that people like to associate people of color with. And through that experience, I understood that something was different about the way young Black people were treated. I can tell you, being Black, and I don't like to use the word Black, so let's talk about how racism affects you. I'm not the color Black. It's very clear to see. And Blacks are the only people, I think, out of all the races who are devoid of a national identity. Everybody gets to call themselves Asian, South Asian, European, Czechoslovakian, Caucasian, if you're going to be devoid of a nation. For Black people, we're called Black. And we're expected to think that Africa, the largest continent, I would say, in the world, we know Asia is, but that's combined and it's a large landmass. But Africa has the most diverse population, over 2,000 languages spoken, and the most variants of human genetics in the world. Yet we're all lumped into one category and viewed as the same. And that's the burden of racism that I've experienced. As I go forward and as I grew up and carried on in my life, I feel responsible for every other person that looks like me who may have dysfunction. I carry the weight, and so do all my brothers and sisters. We carry the weight of each other, knowing every time we see a police report or a shooting, we're either hoping, okay, I hope it wasn't a black person that did it, and I hope it wasn't a black person shot. I had a Facebook conversation with another lawyer fairly recently where I had posted about finding solutions to the gun violence. And the first thing he said was, well, you should get all your people to stop committing crimes. And I'm saying, like, what are you talking about? I'm not that person. I said, I don't blame you when Jeffrey Epstein or somebody else does something. I don't look at you that same way. And then it became a heated debate where everyone's going in and out. And the whole fact of the matter is, every black person, especially black males, carry the burden of being looked at as a criminal, as aggressive, as a sexual predator, as someone not to be trusted. And no matter how well you conduct your life, you still get hit with the brunt of that. And my example is this. After making it through 40 years without a criminal record or being charged, making it into law school, in my final semester, I applied for a ride-along with the Toronto Police. And as I'm applying for this ride-along, I'm thinking, you know, they're probably going to stop me. They probably won't let me go. And then I had to catch myself, and I said, no, that would be ridiculous. You know, why would you think that? You have no record. You're in law school. There's no reason to deny you. Sure enough, I got that call and message that you've been denied your ride-along. And my professors at the time, who are now judges, Justice DeLuca and Justice Rondinelli, were in outrage. They wrote letters. They said, this is one of our best students. Why is this happening? And the police wouldn't answer. They held silence, and then I pushed the issue. Long story short, it ended up in the Human Rights Tribunal, which still hasn't been done, and that was 5 years ago. This case is still going on. But I was told that I was denied because I associate with people with criminal activities. And I said, because I ran a recording studio and mentored youth, you're denying me? And they were like, well, we don't know anything about a studio, but we know that you associate with people with criminal records or activities. So therefore, you're not suitable. It was devastating. And it's just a small fragment of the amount of experiences I've gone through. And I will just read through a list of things, not to take up more time, but as our discussion goes on, I can share more. But I know as being black, I have to work 10 times as hard as everyone else to be looked at equally. And I have to be 10 times more careful in doing what I'm doing in public or in any surroundings. I've grown up with friends, young friends who I thought were friends, and only for them to call me the N-word because I didn't give them a sip of my pop or share something with them at the time that they wanted. I'm called a race baiter or ambulance chaser when I stand up for people in the public. When police abuse people or there's an injustice and I stand up, I'm told that I'm an ambulance chaser and I only fight about race. When they don't understand, all I'm doing is standing up for human rights and human dignity. I have to sit in court and watch judicial decisions that I know are based on race or crown positions that I know are based on race, and all I can do is use my legal education and my intelligence as much as I can bring out to combat that. Most of the time it's successful, but not all the time. And when you're left with knowing what Canadian law is and what the Charter of Rights are, and you argue it to the T, and you still get a decision and you know the decision is wrong, it's a very frustrating place to be. And I can tell you, when I was in grade 11, I thought about being a lawyer. And that was the thing that stopped me. I said, why would I become a lawyer in a system that I know is already biased against me? All I'm going to be is a black lawyer. But you know, after time, I realized that you have to stand up for what is right. And I'll leave it off as this. Growing up here in Canada, I've always known that the Indigenous plight is something that I can never forget because of this plight of the transatlantic slave trade. And I always known that I will never feel free in Canada unless I know the Indigenous people have their property returned, their land returned, and their rights returned. Because as long as there's injustice against the original inhabitants of this land, me as a visitor or an immigrant, and I won't even call it that because the colonial system has done such a good job of bringing my father from Guyana, which was part of the Commonwealth, and my mother from Bermuda, who's part of the Commonwealth, to the land of opportunity such as Canada, together to meet. So this was not a choice to be here. This is all a direct line of indentured servitude and the transatlantic slave trade. And what I just want to finalize by saying is until Indigenous people here are respected and the treaties observed, we will never be free, no matter how much gains we all make. And we have a responsibility to hold true to that. So thank you for the time, and over to you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Nia. First off, the speakers today will be answering questions, and if you have a question, email it to speakerquestions@rotary.com. That's speakerquestions@rotary.com. We have already a question. Stacia, Imran, and Nia, thank you for sharing your experiences. You come from different backgrounds, yet have many shared experiences of racism. Can you tell us more about the impacts these have had on opportunities for you and your family?
I'll start, just because it's at the forefront of my mind. I can say that racism has caused me to continuously work day and night. I run a social justice law firm, and what it does is it limits my income because the amount of people that come towards me for help don't always have money. And recognizing that racial injustice is a real problem, I do these cases, and I then get my firm to do these cases. And then what ends up happening is everybody has to sacrifice in order to address the ill realities of racism. Working from morning, you open your eyes to the time you go to sleep, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, is not the ideal of a balanced, good life. And a lot of people will say, well, you have to know how to say no. But when you're very in tune with what racism is and how it affects others and how every little action makes a difference, people like me and others, we don't stop. We do it continuously because we know how heavy racism affects us on the other side. And without people fighting on the inside, things won't change. So I can tell you that racism takes a huge toll on the personal life and family life, the income, the psychological peace on people who endure it.
Thank you, Nia. That's with people like you, the situation will change over time, please God. But it's such an uphill journey, an uphill battle. Imran, do you have any comments on how it's affected your family and your life in general?
Absolutely, sir. And I wish I had a command on the English speak like Nia. Eloquent argument, I must admit. So the biggest impact that I have endured ever since it became became very difficult to become a Muslim, and coming from the aviation background, is the freedom of movement. As and when I go and travel for work-related purposes or private, almost every time I'm pulled aside, I look suspicious, I'm given a thorough search, lots of arguments, and this is all stemming from the same system that we had in place. And I endure it to this day. The second thing that I've realized is that there is a big erosion, exodus of Muslim people praying in the mosques because of the constant monitoring that has been happening, and the finger pointing and the arson attacks, and for that matter terrorist attacks on the Muslim mosques. That has definitely, there's a shift in the culture from the religious standpoint. Those are the two very common things I observe. Over to you, Stacia.
Now, opportunity is such an interesting concept. I mean, I feel like at many times I've been told over the years, oh, you have all of these opportunities to do such amazing things. And these are usually told to me, or have been told to me by people who haven't lived my experience. And so for others to chime in to say, well, you can do anything you want, you know what, that's not actually always true. You know, I think what Nia said is such an important point around having to work so much harder, being around so much trauma, and not even having the time to be able to heal, that you may be able to see an opportunity in front of you, but there's so much other work that has to be done that, you know, why should I even, you know, take time for myself, or how can I do that? And I think perhaps maybe things have maybe gotten, I want to say, a little bit better in terms of, you know, opportunities and scholarships and grants for Indigenous peoples to be able to apply to. But we're not where we need to be. You know, we see this with children who are in school now, who have been streamed out of opportunities because, you know what, you didn't get a good grade in grade 8. So sorry, when you go to grade 9, well, you know, you need to take this course. And I understand that the provincial government is trying to change that, but a little too late, because quite a lot of harm has already been done to young people who would have had the opportunity to do things. Not to say those hopes aren't there, or those dreams can't be achieved. It's just that it takes that much more effort. And when you're already dealing with the impacts of racism around you through this, you know, systemic racism and institutionalized racism, it's just a constant battle, and it's exhausting. Jeffrey?
Okay, we're getting questions are coming in from all over the place. First, a comment by a YouTube viewer saying that it's very relatable to our viewers and very moving indeed. A question has just come in. For those of us who enjoy white privilege, what can we do or do differently to understand when we are behaving in a way that is or can be perceived as racist? Don't all jump on this one. Anybody want to go first? Raise your hand. Nia?
I always want to go first, Jeffrey, but I try to calm myself down and let others speak. So I'll take this one again. But Imran and Stacia, please, next one, you guys go first. What can people do who experience white privilege? First of all, is to acknowledge it and then share it with the other white people they know who don't believe it exists. The fact that you don't have to think about if a murder on the TV is by a white person or not, how does that affect you and all your family, is white privilege. The fact that if you want to apply for a job, you don't have to think, well, is my name or my appearance going to prevent me from getting a job that I know that I'm qualified for? When you go into the store, you don't have to think, are my hands visible so I don't look like I'm stealing? When you're driving your car, you don't have to think, well, am I going to get pulled over for no reason? And when you're pulled over, you know that you can be as rude as you want to the police officer and not potentially get shot and killed. You can also potentially talk your way out of a ticket. White privilege is basically just living life the way humans should be able to live. So be happy that you have that privilege, but be aware that that privilege has come at a cost of others' deficiencies. And white privilege exists because of the ancestry of European people going to other areas of the globe, dominating, conquering, and taking the resources and subjugating people. And that has allowed whites to live a life free from racism, free from oppression, discrimination. And that is something that is hard to accept, because what it probably makes people feel like is they have blood on their hands. But no one is blaming you directly. I can say this: I treat every person as a person. I don't care what color you are, what religion, what nationality you are. If you're a good person, you're a good person, because all of us in every race, religion, and creed have good people and bad people. But I think the absolutely most important thing that people who are of Caucasian descent can do is correct others around them when they make despicable comments, when they say horrible things, and when they carry prejudicial values or beliefs. It is up to you to correct that behavior, because that way the people who are saying it or behaving like that will start to understand this is not right. I can't just say this anytime I want, because not all of us share that view. Over to you, Station.
I think speaking up is the most important thing. I think recognizing your own biases and really catching yourself. I find that quite a few experiences that I've encountered is that when people start to justify the reasoning for what they believe without hearing the actual experience, that to me is already like you're in a place where you need to check your privilege. So if you're trying to justify, for instance, oh wow, Stacia, you're such an accomplished, Indigenous woman. That's great. How did that ever happen? Or how did you get there? These are the things that, and the language that's being used, that you may very well have the best intentions. And that's the thing. Don't think about your intentions. You need to think how it's impacting other people. So the language that you use is important. Understanding how it is you're using it, and really being able to step up, speak out, and encourage others around you to check their behaviors. It's a hard thing to do depending on the spaces that people are in, but there are kind ways to be honest. And so I would encourage everyone to do that. Over to you, Imran.
Thank you very much, Stacia. To reiterate Nia's point, I will say only two things. Number one, guys, tolerance. We need more tolerance from you. And number two is inclusion. When you include us among yourselves, look at the macro picture. You are strengthening yourself. You have more brains. You have more song. You have more culture. You have more color. It's beautiful that way. Imagine a garden with just one kind of flowers in there. It'll be boring. With all inclusion and your tolerance, this is going to get more beautiful. So that's the only two things I'm going to say to you.
Imran, that's very true. So it's speaker questions at rotary.com. Speaker questions at rotary.com. I've got one here. Nia, Stacia, Imran. The Rotary Club of Toronto has been a long-standing community organization and has always pushed the boundaries for equity, diversity, and injustices. Do you have any suggestions, ideas, initiatives, or partnerships that we could develop to enhance our club to continue this discussion and have an impact on racism in our community? That's a big one. Who wants to go first?
I can go. I think that's a really big question for sure. And I think that's the kind of question that I would recommend that you reach out to, maybe perhaps build a small advisory table of the people that you want to be able to bring into a conversation to identify those things. I'm not sure if this is the best forum from my perspective to start saying, here's who you should go to, talk to this person. I think it's a process that needs to be undertaken with the people who are in those decision-making positions and inviting others to the table to be able to have that conversation. So that's my initial reaction, but I'm also too going to open it up to either Imran or Nia to share their initial thoughts.
I'll take it over. Great question. I think what we need more is the interaction with minority groups, something like Association of Indigenous Friendship Centers, for that matter, or with some certain mosque or Muslim causes. diversity. Basically, that's where the more we include it, I think the more we're going to get ahead with this noble cause. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I would just say that to the Rotary Club, doing some mass outreach or marketing to the communities that normally don't make up the Rotary Club would be very helpful, because I don't think the population that is marginalized really understands what the Rotary Club does or is. And I don't know if you have this already, but maybe allowing for a 1 or 2 or even 3-year membership, free of charge or free of contribution, because it's cost prohibitive for a lot of the communities and members who really want to join. I'm sure if you brought some in that normally wouldn't be in, you would get a wealth of experience and knowledge and contributions that'll be way more valuable than whatever financial contribution they can put, at least in the time being. So that's an initial suggestion, but I agree with Stacia and Imran, and especially this requires more thought and potentially an advisory board to assist in those areas. Back to you, Jeffrey.
Okay, it's speaker questions at rotarytoronto.com, and they are coming in. This one is from a young lady called Wendy. Thanks for doing this. I am thankful, as I am and have been living racism in my daily work and community life. Is it okay for white people to bring up the conversation with friends of color or different religion or LGBTQ2 and just ask what it is like? John Fortney, Harvey Callis. Anybody want to jump on that one?
Yeah, I would just say it's definitely okay to ask. It's just, again, how are you asking? If you ask it in a blurting, insensitive way, it may be taken as an offensive comment. But if you preface it like, hey, I'm really concerned about how racism is still continuing and playing out. Could you share with me some of your experiences so I can understand better what it's like? And something like that. So it's really about how you ask, but it's always good to ask. That's how we get knowledge.
Anybody else on that one?
Again, sir, I think a constant dialogue between multiple different parties will help this cause forward, and I'm all for inclusion. Stacia?
Yeah, I would agree with Nia. I mean, I think it really is how you're approaching the topic of conversation, the space that you're in, who else is around. And also too, again, like this kind of goes back to our previous points around unconscious bias and really in your own privilege in the space that you're in, to consider how someone else is going to feel when you raise that question. And I think I think these are important conversations to have. It's a matter too of understanding that perhaps your perspective may not necessarily be the truth. So you may see something and think that you know what's happening, but yet that approach is how you ask the question may be completely far from the facts, that you're then now being insensitive or perhaps showing that you have some sort of unconscious bias towards the issue. So I think it's really taking a step back, thinking through what the issue is, and then understanding not only the individual, what's the relationship that you have with them? Are you able to have this conversation? Is the space appropriate? And then proceeding from there. Jeffrey?
I think it's a situational call.
Here's one aimed at Nia. Do you find as an attorney, you are made to feel less than when you are with your colleagues? Are you demeaned as an attorney essentially because of your color?
No, actually, it's quite the opposite. I think a lot of my colleagues, well, it depends if they're talking about colleagues lawyer-wise, but my friends are really happy that I've made this step. They're proud. They feel empowered. I hear messages from the community all the time. Thank you for doing what you do. So it's it's very empowering to have that support. But I can also tell you that, I'll be honest, my colleagues within the profession, I don't find much support from. I've actually had a couple bad experiences. And it seems like because the profession has been dealt with in a way that I would consider devoid of true grit and advocacy for all lawyers, in my opinion. But then when it comes to the Black community, I don't see that many lawyers really fighting the hard fight for justice. I was surprised in law school when I seen so many people there for corporate law. I was actually pretty naive because I thought everybody was in law school because they wanted to do social justice and they wanted to fight for people's rights. And I was like, Bay Street? What? Corporate? What? So that became interesting. But what I can say is the racism is through everywhere. It is through the profession. My colleagues have supported me, but some of them have not. And I think that just being in associations such as Black student associations and seeing how they're scared to challenge racial issues. And even while I was fighting carding, while I was a student, everyone was more focused on their work rather than the real fight for protecting people's rights. And I'm not expecting everyone to give themselves up in the same way. But at the same time, if you see around you, your world is affected by race in such a significant manner, and you are now in law school or a lawyer, and you have that strength and that power to make a difference, you really should be using your gifts and your skills and your privilege for the right reasons. So I'll just leave it at that. Not everyone does it for the right reasons, but I've had support, but I've also had bad experiences.
Excellent. You know, I'm a chef, and I remember about 20 years ago, I was having dinner with 6 other chefs, and each of us, there was black ones, white ones, Asians, all over the world. And one of the chefs made a comment that if the world was like a kitchen, there would be no racism, because we all respect one another, because we all learn from one another. All of these chefs from throughout the world have stood by their mother's side and watched, and they absorb the culture and the love of what they're doing. And we share our techniques and our knowledge from Africa to South America, and we absorb that. It's just a comment I thought would be true, and I would have hoped that in the law, in particularly, that the justice was the primary cause, but apparently not. But
so what I would say, Jeffrey, sorry, I would say this: most of the support that I've experienced fighting for racial issues are from white lawyers, and they're just good people. I won't even say their race, because they're good people who see injustice, and they've always said, Nia, thanks for what you're doing. Anything you need, we're there for you. And I've had great colleagues, regardless of race, but it comes down to good people.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. All chefs are good people. There's one here in general: I cannot change the past. I cannot tell my ancestors they were wrong. How can we work together to move forward? And I think you've touched on this with how we could all get on better, and what what we could do to do better.
Sorry, Jeffrey, I want to say this. You can't change the past, but you can tell your ancestors they were wrong. And I think that's where we're missing progress. Because if we acknowledge what has happened has built all this wealth and has created a disproportionate advantage, that's when we can start having the real serious conversations. And I'll note, in university, I went to university for the first time at the age of 36, and I had an argument with my professor, who I respect very much. And I had said, without the slave trade, we would not have the steam engine. And he couldn't conceptualize that. And the point of the matter is, when you have a mass abundance of free labor and free land taken from all the indigenous people, and you amass this wealth, you can do things that you've never done before, which is create a locomotive, which is create a railroad across the land. So ancestors have to be blamed. And maybe it's not blame, but it's something that has to be acknowledged. People took advantage of other human beings. And one thing, it always seems like it's a far off imaginary world where this took place. But if you start tracing back, you can draw the lines and you can just see how people take advantage of other countries. They go to other countries and they spend their dollar in a different way. They hire mass amounts of servants. But this was a time where you weren't even paying your servants. So please be mad at your ancestors. Tell them they were wrong. Can't change the past, but I think you really need to tell them they were wrong.
Mm-hmm. I was just saying, I think we're seeing that play out in many different ways, in terms of some of these historical figures who may or may not be your ancestor, but was definitely, had a role to play in either drafting legislation or policy and how that's carried out over the years. And I think, this is one of the things that I didn't touch on in my opening, but it's one of the points that people raise that really, and with all due respect to the question, really, really upsets me. The get over it question, right? Or the get over it comment. Why don't you just get over it? Let's move on. That's in the past. All of the examples that I've given you today are current. That's my experience. I'm not 100 years old yet. Maybe I will live to be that old. But these are recent experiences, and I know that even people close to me that are much younger than me, and I will use my daughter. I'm not going to share her experiences with you, but she's had her own experiences as a young Indigenous woman growing up through accessing healthcare services at hospitals, trying to just get through high school and then university. So these things are not from the past. These are systemic issues, institutionalized systems and networks that have impacted people, Indigenous people, Black people, or African Canadian people, Nia, and other people of color. So these things still exist. So I think the question, and maybe perhaps even the other question that was raised is, well, what can I do? Think about how we can start to change these systems. What do we need to do to dismantle this? And I don't mean that in a radical sense, but what can we do to start chipping away at the things that just do not work anymore? And so I will leave that there. Imran?
May I second lovely Stacia here that the question that is on the table is what can we do? I think what you can do is take a quick trip to Timmins or any of the reserves, and you will see the plight of the Indigenous people. I've seen it with my own eyes, and it's not a happy story. Or go into the Jane and Finch area and spend a day over there. Get to see how people are living. Go to Brampton. Get to see how people are living. And you will get a reality check and you will know what to do going forward. Jeffrey?
Well, in terms of ancestry, I guess my crew have got a lot to be blamed for, but we won't go into that. We're getting close to the end of our segment here. I've got two questions. One, Vanita, my colleague here, says, I don't think you should say this one, so I will. Somebody writes in and says, I was running a student pub when we had a strict policy regarding appropriate music. And one of my in-house radio staff was playing a song that had the N-word in it. And I asked him to stop playing that song. And he said to me, it's okay. We call each other that in our own culture. He was Black. And I told him that was not acceptable under any circumstances. What are your thoughts?
Whoever wrote that question is my hero. I hate the word. I'm a big fan of hip hop. The music that started did not carry that word throughout all the time. It's become a more recent phenomenon. But regardless of how people use it, it's being used in the wrong way because it's a hurtful, painful. It's the worst word I've ever heard ever in my life, and it creates so much pain that people need to understand how painful it is. And I think the desensitization of it just perpetuates the lesser than. And for an example, someone said that to me one day, not in an offensive way, trying to be a comrade. And I said, if Obama was beside me, would you call him that? And they said no. And I said, exactly. Because this word is used only when you have a lower level of respect for someone. If you have the right amount of respect, you won't use it. It's not acceptable in any circumstances. And great on that pub owner. And it's unfortunate that our own people don't understand or critically analyze it enough. I've been in quite a few debates. It's become a force of habit. It's become normalized. It now has become a way of relating to each other. So people find comfort in it. But if they were to understand the root and the pain that is associated and the atrocities that were done while using that word, yelling it in someone as you're burning them on a cross or raping their mother or destroying their baby, then only people will start to say, you know what, I don't want to use that word. So my thoughts on that, great on that person for doing it. And I thank them, and I would support them.
Absolutely. I think when you use the N word, you're basically looking to relegate somebody to a subhuman level, and that is wrong. Stacia?
I'll actually choose not to comment on this because I really look to Nia as and his expertise and his experience to answer that, and I feel like he has from his perspective, and I don't feel that it's my place at this time to be able to comment on that.
Okay, that's well done for sending that question. That's a great explanation. In the West Indies, where I've spent a reasonable amount of time drinking rum and talking absolute nonsense, the N word doesn't have the meaning that it has here. You have the N word. There's an N word pepper, which is a short, really, really hot pepper. There's an N-word yam that is a particular size of yam. And the people use the word in a totally different manner as it's perceived. It's perceived totally differently in the West Indies than it is here. But it's a terrible thing. We've got one more question, and we've got about 5 minutes. This is one of the longest sessions Rotary's had in the last 6 months. I should have sold advertising space. This is from a guy called Donald Wright. When discussing ways to combat racism and educate all people on its impact on our society, it's vital to include children in the conversation and education. We are often reluctant to have the hard conversations with our kids, thinking they are too young to know the truth. As a result, they learn the truth the hard way. How often have we argued the value of sex education, yet approximately 1 in every 17 Canadian women is raped at some point in her life? It may be a cliche, but it's no less true. We need to educate children and adults to stop the cycle. Anybody?
I couldn't agree with the Donald Wright anymore. I think we need to educate our future generations to not to partake in these belittling affairs. I think through a constant dialogue with our kids and is the only way we will move forward on issues like these. Stacia?
education is definitely important. It's not education in the institutionalized sense. It's actually having these really honest conversations with your children, with your partners, with other people around you. And I think it's really important to understand the stages of development of children and when they're ready to hear these things, and maybe perhaps when they're not. I think it's really also too critical to try to identify the things that are happening around your children that might create environments where they may have questions, and be preemptive about it, to have these conversations, to say, okay, you know what, we're going to a new space. There's going to be different people here. So trying to be appropriate to not only the age that your children, or again, that others around you are at. You may be able to have way more frank conversations with your spouse or your partner, or your even your grandmother. I have conversations with my grandmother too about certain things. and it's being able to frame it in a way where they can understand what's happening and be able to identify appropriate responses, and just creating space after to have those around you actually talk about it, debrief, create that open space, that open dialogue. So I would hand that over now to Nia.
Thank you, Yega Hadaki. I will say this: growing up, my mom tried to tell me this very young, so I don't think it's ever too early to teach a child. I was resistant. I didn't understand. I was young. I had my friends. I thought, no, I've never been treated like that, so racism doesn't exist. My mother told me people are going to treat you differently because of your color, and I didn't believe her until it started happening. And now I'm one of the most active people speaking about race around right now, and it's really funny because you never knew you never knew would be an issue. So I think no age limit, teach, because it's a reality. That's our dog Newbie.
Yes, that's our dog Newbie. We are in the same household. Yeah, so I mean, I think, Nia, I wanted to just to say that I don't think it's like, okay, you know what, be mindful of age and don't teach until certain ages. I think it's also to being corrective, right? Being corrective about when you see something, you address it, because these ideas and these feelings manifest and build up over the years, and if they're not corrected at a younger age, or addressed, or even talked about, or swept under the rug, or save it for another day, or I'm too tired to deal with that, all it does is, I feel like, gets out of hand. So, Jeffrey?
Okay, well, that's where we're out of time. I'd like to thank Nia, Stacia, and Imran. Thank you very, very much for bearing your hearts and souls today. And I'm sure this is going to make a big difference.
Thank you very much. Thank you much, John.
We are going to continue next week. So all of our viewers, I've never ever said this on a media before, to all of our viewers out there, tune in to the next two sessions on the 29th of January, next Friday, and the 5th of February. The third session is going to show the route home, as it were. Next week, we're going to really in-depth examine systemic racism and unconscious bias, and we have two outstanding speakers. So thank you, everybody, and over to John.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Stacia, Imran, and Kunai. It's been sobering. I don't think there's any surprises. I know we like to think that things are better here than in other places, but better is not good enough. We have a long way to go. It's funny is this week I was watching Yellowstone. It's a series, and the youngest son of this wealthy family is married to an Indigenous woman who's a teacher or professor. And there's a scene where she walks into a high-end boutique, and you can imagine it's Pretty Woman times 1,000. It's horrific, gut-wrenching. it brought me to tears. It was, and not just because it was horrible, because I know it happens, and you know, things have to change. To think that you have to, like now, you have to be 10 times more cautious before you do something or say something, or it must be tiring. I don't know how, you know, sometimes you just don't know what to do. Words matter, you know. You're talking about the N word. It's just repulsive in any, there is no acceptable. And when you add the other words, you know, for gay people, the F word, or any ethnic or religious people, there's always these awful names that people, and it's power, right? It's showing I'm better than you because I use this horrible word. So words are so, so, so important. We've learned a lot today. Jeffrey and team, I want to thank you for, and Sylvia, I want to thank you so much for putting this together. For Stacia, Imran, and Kanai, we have a donation has been made in your honor to Water First, Canada's leading charitable organization working with First Nations communities to resolve local water challenges through education, training, and meaningful collaboration. Since 2009, Water First has partnered with over 40 Indigenous communities in Ontario, Quebec, and Labrador on a variety of education and training projects focusing on drinking and environmental water. This donation has been made in partnership with the Rotary Club of Toronto's Indigenous Service Committee. Thank you so much, three of you. Next Friday, January the 29th, will be the second of our races.
Thank you very much for having us.
Our pleasure. Next week will be the second in our racism series, exploring systemic racism today, with guest speakers Gail Nathanson, Dahabo Ahmed, Omar, and for our members, we will be having our part 2 of our annual general meeting to announce the incoming vice president and the new director. So please, everyone, come next week. And for members of the club, stay afterwards. I think there's nothing else left to say. We've had a lot to think about this weekend. I want everyone to go have a great weekend and enjoy this sunny day. And actually, I do want to say one thing to our 3 members. I've been in our club for 21 years, and I know the image is that our club, or Rotaries around the world, are rich old white guys. And we're trying really hard to change that. Our new branding material just came out this week. Our club has changed dramatically, especially in the last few years. And a lot of our members are coming through the internet. So it's not bring your friend. It's our club is great. I'm so happy that it is incredibly diverse right now, way more diverse than it was when I joined 21 years ago. And I went to a large club conference last year, and diversity is becoming an issue, or not issue, sorry, being talked about. And I was so proud to say that one of the oldest clubs in Rotary, Toronto, is very diverse and hopefully becoming more and more diverse every day, because like Imran said, a beautiful garden full of different flowers is way more beautiful than a garden of one flower. So with that, everyone have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Again, to our 3 presenters, thank you so much. Maybe you guys would like to join Rotary. We'd love to have you. Talk to you later and have a great weekend. The meeting is adjourned.